G'day and welcome to Craft With Us Oz. I am Donna Arthur and thank you for joining me today. Today's card is the second in the Cards for My Family and Friends series that I'm hoping to stay on top of this year. This card is for one of my lovely little granddaughters, Ellie. I'll be using this really sweet Flower Fairy stamp and die set and the items from my Tutti Frutti card builder pack. Now this pack comes with 12 cards and envelopes, 6 A4 cardstock sheets, matching ribbons and gemstones. So there's actually 6 different colors, 2 cards of each. So I'll actually have a link at the bottom of the video for the products I used today that are available for sale. So right, the sales pitch is done. Let's go crafting. So the first thing that I did was to stamp out the little girl, she's going to become the fairy, onto some scrap paper. This is actually just printing paper and then I fussy cut her out. I wasn't that careful with the fussy cutting. You can also see though that I cut her into 3 pieces and we'll be using those pieces as masks. Just grabbing my stamping tool here and I'm positioning my stamp onto some white cardstock. Like all stamping tools, I just need to close the door and pick up the stamp. So the first ink that I'm going to be using today is Smoky Slate from Stampin' Up. You could use any soft grey ink for this. You probably could use any really soft colour, but we only want a very light impression because we need this to help us with positioning the masks that we've created. So to ensure that this is the case, I stamp the image onto a piece of scrap paper first and then onto my cardstock. So I just put the scrap paper into my stamp tool over the top, ink up my stamp as you can see that I'm doing here, and then I just press that onto my scrap paper to get rid of the majority of the ink, and then I'm just going to stamp it onto my cardstock. So I just wanted a really light impression because it's just going to show me and help me line up my mask. So you can hardly see that there, but that's perfect. So the first mask that I'm using is the one for the skirt section. So I, in actual fact, just attach this with some low tack masking tape to hold it into place. Because this is going to be cut out anyway, I don't need to stress too much about it. This masking tape that I use is just low tack painter's tape that I buy from Bunnings, and it's quite inexpensive and it just works like a charm. Okay, so now that that's taped down, I'm going to use some Memento Tuxedo black ink. So I'm using this just in the head section there and on the feet. I kind of overstamped there, but that's okay. The mask will protect the area that I want. I'm using Memento black ink, as I was saying, because I'm going to use some alcohol markers to color this in. I'm not going to show you that. I'm not real good at that. So there are other people that are experts. So I'm just pressing that down. Obviously I want a little bit of a hand and I've used a wet wipe, but I normally use my microfiber cloth, so I must have had it handy. Press that down. I actually think that my my pad needs to be inked up a little bit, so I'm just going to stamp that again. I want it really black, so. And of course this is so much easier with a stamping tool because it'll stamp directly over the grey. So you can see I've just stamped that a second time. Now I've left this cleaning section in. I've used another wet wipe to clean this up. You need to make sure that you get all of the ink off, particularly off the skirt section, because we're going to be stamping that a different colour. And once you've done that, you just carefully remove the mask. And then I've put the mask down for the head and the feet. The ink that I'm using for this section is called Fern and it's from Kaisercraft. So you can see that I am just putting it in the skirt section. She's a little flower fairy, as I said, so this is kind of vine that's coming down. So once again, I'm just going to stamp that down and it's perfectly over the grey. So we won't see the grey at all. The only thing is that I want that a little bit darker, so I'm going to do a second stamp again. Ink up the section that I want with the green ink. And stamp the image a second time. Press that down nice and firmly. All right, now we can remove all of the masks, clean that off. And this is actually a layering stamp set, and these are little flowers that line up with little green dots at the base of her skirt. It is so pretty. I was so excited as to how well this came out. It was beautiful. This one I'm just using some Stampin' Up! Melon Mambo. Once again, your colors can be anything, any stamps. It's not really a big issue here. And then you can see that when that lines up beautifully, that was nice and easy. Press that down, and we've got flowers at the bottom of the skirt. So this is my little flower fairy completed. So all I've done now is I've colored it in, and I cut out some wings with some vellum from the die set. All right, so these are nesting dies. It's a set of rectangles with the laced scalloped edge, and I'm going to use these to make a fancy frame. So to do this, you need to pick the 2 dies to give you the size frame that you want. And normally you would line them up. So you can see how I'm doing that on my craft mat. However, you do need to make sure that you don't knock them and that they don't move before you cut them out. So I use my nesting dies to make a lot of frames. I do this a lot. And so I needed something to make it a little bit easier. So I created this guide. So you create the guide by lining up all of the dies. I love it when you first get the dies and they're all attached. And then I cut it out of black cardstock and then white cardstock. Then I start from the smallest one in the center and stick them onto another piece of cardstock in alternating colors, as you can see that I've done here. This means that you can use this as a guide to line up your dies, and as you saw in the video here, they kind of lock in a little bit like a jigsaw piece, and then once they're in place, they're perfectly lined up. You just use some masking tape to put them together. This way my frames are always nice and even. I can see here I just cut out 3 of the frames and I stuck them all together to give me some depth. So today I thought I would show you some of my creative process. So I like to make sure that the items and the colors that I've chosen look good together before I go cutting into my cardstock. So often what's in my head comes out as a complete disaster, so it's always good to check. So you can see here that I'm putting all of the elements together to make sure that I have the desired look. What I didn't film was where I tried it, excuse me, with a pink card base and the fairy on yellow with the white frame. Needless to say, it was not the look I was after. So my card is a 5" by 7". I cut my pink card stock to be 4 3/4 by 6 3/4 to give me that nice border around the edge. So one last check, and I decided I want my fairy to move a little bit. So I have no doubt that my 5-year-old Ellie would love a flying flower fairy on her card. So don't say that when you've had a couple of wines. I don't actually have any of the special mechanisms that you buy, so I decided to make one. I grabbed some florist wire. You could use any other pliable wire that you may have, and I wrapped it around and around the pen. I think that that's like 4 or 5 times around the pen. This particular pen was perfect for this job because it was nice and thick and it was even all the way up and down. You can see here I'm using my side cutters to cut the wire, but honestly I think that you could probably use scissors, you know, use some old ones or bend it back and forward. You just slip it then off the pen. Okay, so now I've cut 2 1-inch circles. I am using my craft mat there to line it up a little bit and pop a hole in the center. You need to do that for both of them. And then I just thought that I'd be able to put the spring through the hole, but as you can see that didn't really work. So I'm just making some minor adjustments. And to both ends, I'm just kind of spinning that wire around a little bit to finish in the center and pop that in. Let's see how that goes. Spin it around a little bit, and that is so much better. All I did then was cut off some double-sided tape, stuck it over the piece of the spring that was sticking out of that white cardstock, and I did the same for both ends. It was really quite nice and easy. There it is, going for the second end there. Let's just check and see how that looks. That looks fine. Remembering no one's really going to see it, and testing, it works really quite well. I finished it off by putting some more double-sided tape on each end, and I will use this to attach my fairy to my card. So back to the frame, I used wet glue for this, and I added the glue in little dots all the way the outside of the frame. This took me about 2 minutes, so it wasn't really that long, but you could use spray glue if you wanted. And then I positioned it on my pink card. So sometimes I think it takes me longer to position things than it did maybe to put the glue on than this one. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so I want to make sure that it is centered perfectly and nice and straight. Most of the time I'll use my T-ruler, but I didn't this time. But pressing it down really firmly to make sure that it's all attached. So the next thing I did is I just removed the double-sided tape from one of the ends of my homemade spring mechanism. And I also put some glue on it, you know, for good measure. And then I carefully position that on the back of the fairy. Now I want to make sure that it's as central as possible because you want that fairy to be nice and even. So sorry about my head getting in the way there. Get to see, you know, my messy hair. So while that was off drying, I put double-sided tape all around the edges of the back of my pink card. So you could easily use tape runner here or wet glue if you prefer. But once again, you know, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I do like to do it this way so I can get the card really nice and straight. So to achieve that, I simply lift the backing tape off the tape in opposite corners just a small amount and fold the backing of the tape out. And you can see how I'm doing that here. Once that's all done, I can position that over my card base. Always check the fold of the card. I have put them on the wrong way so many times. So I'm just positioning that, making sure it's nice and straight. Then I can just press it down in the two corners where the tape backing has been removed and carefully pull out the rest of the backing. Push it down and it's nice and secure and it's nice and straight. Alright, so now I believe we get to put the fairy into place. So the exciting part of the card. I'm just removing the backing from the other end of the homemade spring mechanism. I'm going to add a bit more glue and secure the fairy onto the card. This is always a really good idea, particularly if you're making it for a kid, because they're going to want to flick this all of the time. In hindsight though, I think it would have been better to attach it further to the top of the frame, but you know, it is what it is. I'm pressing that down really well, and wow, look at her go. Yep, so she's really cute. So I used the happy birthday greeting from the stamp set, and I stamped it on some white cardstock with the fern green ink that I used on her skirt. So just sharing one of my processes there, you can see I can never decide where to put it, so I moved it around till I found the place that I was happiest with it. It was while I was doing this that I realized I should have had the fairy further up, but I ended up just positioning it at the base of the fairy, put some double-sided foam tape on the back of it, and there we are. To finish off my card, I used Wink of Stella pen to put on her wings, which I think you can see in the photographs, and a sentiment inside. I just love the way this card turned out. I was so happy with it. So once again, thank you for joining me today, and I hope I was able to help you with some processes for your card making. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you could give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Catch you next time.